Here we go. Hello and welcome to all of you, our panel guests, our audience at home. And it's probably a bit cheesy, but each one of us are here today thanks to some incredible women in our lives. But as well as those women who brought us into the world, there's a community of computer scientists, computing educators and teachers. And I like to think of myself as part of that community. And I believe we're very fortunate to work with some very inspiring women who work in our field. And today I've managed to persuade a few of them to come and join us. So they've taken a bit of a leap of faith or trust with me. So the plan is to start with just a few words from myself as we're doing at the moment. Then I'm going to introduce you to our guest panelists. And then we have some questions that we've prepared. Some were sent in by our audience. But it may be that our audience on YouTube also send in some really, really good questions that we'll have to fit in. Now, when I say we'll have to fit things in, the plan is we're going to run for about 45 minutes. And there's a few reasons for that. I don't know if you're watching the live version of this or the recording, but as we're recording this now, the film Hidden Figures will be on film 4 at 9 o'clock. It's an absolutely amazing film. You may have seen it. If you haven't, once we finish, please go over there and watch it. And it tells the story of some amazing African-American ladies working at NASA in the 1960s when all sorts of things were going on in the United States, not just in terms of women, but civil rights and all of that. So we're planning to finish in time to allow you to go and watch it. And it starts an hour later on film 4+1. If you're watching the recording of this and not the live version, well, you can also go and watch a panel discussion, which we called Exa of Hidden Figures. And one of our panel guests joined us for that particular one. And there's also clips from the film that you can watch at any point. So they're on our Exa YouTube channel. So I'm just going to tell you the link. I might type in the chat. It's exa.is/hidden figures, all lowercase, no spaces. Well, now, while thinking about hosting this event, it's like, is this the right thing to be doing? And I suppose in an ideal world, we shouldn't really need a day to celebrate incredible women in our lives or to recognize their achievements. But International Women's Day also marks an important call to action to progress gender equality even further. Some people would say a little bit has happened and lots more needs to. So every year this event is intended to raise, sorry, not the event, the day is intended to raise awareness, campaigning, support organizations that all focus on gender equality. Now, sadly, as I've just mentioned, there are still gender representation and diversity issues, particularly in our subject, computing, computer science, and in some of the STEM subjects as well. Now, please bear in mind, we're not going to be able to address all of these in a 45-minute panel discussion for all sorts of reasons. And one of those is we still don't know exactly what works in terms of making a difference. There are some encouraging early pieces of research that have been published by organizations like the Raspberry Pi Foundation. And if you're a computing educator, you may have seen the Hello World magazine. So it's a recurring theme in there about things that teachers are doing to try to address gender diversity issues in their classroom. And there's loads of other organizations. And we will probably mention some of these this evening. In fact, some of us work for some of those as well, all trying to change things for the better. So our panel will discuss some practical opportunities, but it's meant to be like, rather than an academic conference thing, it's just meant to be a bunch of people coming together, sharing some light-hearted moments perhaps as well, and some practical recommendations. And I hope we'll try and keep it a little bit light-hearted. Now, before we move on to our panel, I'd like to highlight, and they might want to put their fingers in their ears or cover their faces, because I've chosen tonight's panel because I think, you know, if I was putting the team together, as I have done, this team is a very, very interesting team that we've got tonight. I'm going to mention some of the things that, I'm not going to mention their names, but I think some of you may figure out which one applies. But you'll find, if you know our panel tonight, you'll find them very accommodating and supportive. So I'm not looking at anyone in particular. They're brave, they're risk-taking and adventurous. Some of them are doing things that many other people wouldn't. but they're also extremely trusting and respecting, patient and understanding, and questioning and understanding, or I mentioned that, but also guiding and analyzing and evaluating. And finally, the really one I find very important is encouraging and enthusiastic of others. So these are just a few of the qualities why I've put this particular panel together. So please do use the chat. We have some questions that we're going to move over to now. What I'm going to do is we're going to try and, if we can, where possible, go by alphabetical by surname. So we have Ashman, Cater, Danino, Sach and Shah, but we don't always have to follow those rules. But if we start in a moment, if I could ask each one of you in that order, perhaps, to just tell us a little bit about yourself, your name, and if you want to throw anything else in there at this point as well that people ought to know about. So Estelle, that's over to you now.
Okay, I'm Estelle Ashman. I'm curriculum content developer for Digital Schoolhouse. I do that part-time, and the other part of my my working life is as a primary school teacher, but I have a specialism in teaching computing, so I only teach computing to years 3 to 6.
Okay, so next it's Penny.
Okay, so I'm Penny Cater, and at the moment I am the head of faculty for business, computing and technology at the Boswell School, which is a secondary school. I've been there for about 8 years now. I'm fairly new to teaching, so I've been in teaching about 11 years and was lucky enough to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers as senior manager for a while before that.
And we're to D now.
I think I'm next. My name is Nikki Danino. I'm academic lead for computer science at the University of Central Lancashire. And Alan, I really enjoyed your words to describe us, but I think you left a really important one out. And I think that word is challenging, because it is our duty to challenge constantly the stereotypes and, you know, just challenge people on things, you know, challenge them on assumptions. And I definitely think that certainly would be a word I would describe myself as, challenging.
Now are we trying to figure out
Laura?
I think it's me. Yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Laura Sach. I work for the Raspberry Pi Foundation. At the moment I'm working on Isaac Computer Science, so it's a site which supports teachers with A-level computing. But prior to that, I was a teacher for I think about 9 years. Didn't quite make it to 10, I'm not quite sure. A while. So I've also worked in schools too.
They do say though, once a teacher, always a teacher.
Oh, most definitely. I still would count myself as a teacher even though I'm not practicing.
And Rahini.
Hello, good evening. My name is Rohini Shah. I work at Queen's Park Community School in London. It's an inner city school. It's the only school I've worked at. I've been there 17 years. I used to be head of computer science, but I gave that up. So I work 3 days a week now, teaching computer science and improving my teaching, because I believe that, you know, teaching is like that bottomless pit. You can never, you know, get enough of trying different pedagogy and all that. Prior to that, I used to be in computing in the city. So I've worked for BT, NatWest Bank and IBM Global Services. And after I had my children, I gave that life up to become a teacher for a better work-life balance.
How's that working out for you?
Well, it really did help me. And my children are grown up now. They're 24 and 22.
Okay, so welcome to our panel. We have roughly about 5 questions tonight, so there is an opportunity if people want to put questions in the chat on YouTube, then we can try to address those as we will. So so today is International Women's Day, so happy International Women's Day everybody, viewers at home. But it's probably occurred to you that there are other days that happen in a calendar to try to raise gender equality within STEM and computer science. So I'm going to mention Ada Lovelace Day in a moment, but there are Women in Engineering Days, there's Women in STEM, and there's a whole manner of these throughout the year. Now, what I'd like you to do on our panel is I'd like you to reflect back on one of these kind of activities. So we could say an Ada Lovelace Day kind of activity, and one that stood out for you because you thought it worked really well, it really did help make a difference. Or maybe you don't mind telling us warts and all about one that really didn't succeed in the way that it should have done. And then if you don't mind elaborating on what were the features that made the great example work really well, or what were the ones that made you cringe? And if you were ever seen or doing the second kind of one again, you would want to change it. So it's I said before, some of you are very brave and risk-taking and patient and understanding.
Are we going to do this in alphabetical order again?
Whoever goes first.
Okay. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of Ada Lovelace resources that I've used in the classroom. I don't tend to actually have a specific resource that we use on Ada Lovelace Day, but we do make a big thing about it and we celebrate on the day. But every day is Ada Lovelace Day. So first of all, like one of the things that we do with my year 4 students is we do a research topic, and the students research some key figures in computing, and one of them of course is Ada Lovelace, and they really enjoy researching her, finding pictures what she looked like, or what she might have looked like. I think probably there's a little bit of artistic license in some of those pictures, and what's really interesting is that we then in year 6 we go back and we do a topic around we look at binary and punch cards, and we look a little bit about how Ada Lovelace kind of predicted that punch cards might be used for music in the future. And they always remember from year 4, they always remember Ada Lovelace, their memory, which is really lovely. So they look at the really famous quote where Ada Lovelace talks about how, how she predicts in the future that these machines will be able to produce music. And then we use switches, the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Labo kit, which is all the cardboard kit. And the students make drum tracks out of punch cards. And it really sticks in the memory. I think they really enjoy it. It's really hands-on, it's really fun, interactive, and then they get to make a really huge amount of noise, which is always really good for year 6 students.
Shall I go next?
I'm really resistant not butting in, sorry.
Sorry, Estelle, have you finished?
Yeah, I finished. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. Okay, so we run a unit. It's not really an Ada Lovelace Day, but we do run a unit where we look at web development. And one of the things we introduced, we used to give people the opportunity to pick their own themes and things. But actually, when the film came out, Hidden Figures, what we found was actually it was quite a good theme to have for a research task for the websites. So we now developed the unit so that the students actually do some research on a hidden figure, and we look at what does hidden figure actually mean, who does it relate to, and we've had some really interesting concepts, and it's really developed that thought process of how many jobs are there out there where you always see that person at the forefront, but there is a whole team of people behind them. And that's really been incredible to see some of the names that have come up. And even one of the students that really stands out, she did it on her mum because that was a hidden figure. She saw her as an inspiration to her. And that was really incredible. So it's technically not Ada Lovelace Day, but it is along the theme of hidden figures, and there are a lot of them.
I'll go then. So we haven't used any Ada Lovelace kind of days as such, but we do hold a day when we invite somebody in technology, because I think being in inner London, we have access to these people. So a few times we've invited LJ Rich and Kate Russell from BBC Click, and they've come in to work with some of the girls in our school. And I think they've been enjoyable because they do activities, hands-on activities, where they sort of act out algorithms and almost make it like play to engage these students. And I think, Estelle, what you mentioned about, like, you know, having some hands-on activity, because one of my passion is to get more girls into the subject. I think that's what we're missing at our school, is having a lot more hands-on. Somehow I think we, well, certainly at our school, we kind of miss that. And I think bringing that in, I'm hoping that we can really, really inspire some of the girls, that it is fun, it is creative, it is hands-on, and yeah, you know. But yeah, LJ Rich and Kate Russell have been at our school from BBC Click, and I think our students have identified with them, and they know that they're current, and that's not to disrespect anything that Ada Lovelace has done. Or
there's another teacher who we speak about these issues sometimes, Adrienne, you may know her, and we've been talking as well about how some of the programs that are on TV now, and you might have noticed this particularly, say, on the BBC, where they're trying to get a more balanced team in terms of, you know, so for example, the sport is regularly presented now by female presenters. The BBC Click series, there's a male and a female presenter. Clearly, there's still a lot more that can be done.
Yeah. It's a strain on women, though, isn't it? So a lot of what we do is aimed at staff and students in terms of days like International Women's Day today, for example. But obviously, the university run the Lancashire Science Festival, which is the largest family-aimed science festival in the UK. And what you tend to find is, you know, we all volunteer to do it because it's done in summer and over a weekend. So it's a Saturday as well. And there is a disproportionate number of women who volunteer to do outreach. So they are not reflective of how many women are in that subject. And that's fantastic, because the kids and the families and all the schools who come to the science festival will see a female physicist talking to them about physics, or they'll see me talking to them about computing. But it also means that there's that weight on women to go out there and represent the subject. So it's even more work for us, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's true. I've heard that certainly from sort of other universities, when it's very difficult to get people involved with outreach. And then, as you said, a lot of women tend to volunteer.
I love it because I like to dress up. So I always tend to dress up as a female character. You know, so it's really fun. But
I think you're just looking for any excuse to put on a fancy costume.
Yeah. I dressed up one year as a Emmy. I can't remember her surname. She's the lady who discovered the centrifugal force in physics. And but the point is that I think unless more funding and more, I guess it's money, man, put your money where your mouth is, pay for outreach, and then you'll get more women doing it and doing it properly. We all know, I think they say that women work for free for 2 months of the year because of the gender pay gap. So it's just as bad asking women, oh, why don't you go and work on a Saturday, because we need more role models. I'm like, okay, I'll do it, but pay me. You know.
Well, it's important, Nikki. We want you to do this thing. It's just not so important that we actually pay you to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And
Laura, any experiences you've had?
I've got to tell you about something that went really badly wrong, Alan, to be honest. I know you're waiting, right? I know you.
Because if we hear of some of these, we can go, oh, we mustn't do what Laura
It didn't go badly wrong because of the tech, though, I just want to say. So I've not actually ever done anything for Ada Lovelace Day specifically. I'm not entirely sure why. I think it's sort of come online since I've stopped teaching, or maybe it was, you know, just before. But because of the school that I worked in, we used to have to basically run these days where we sold the school to all the girls in the local area. And I say girls because it was a girls' school, not because we were only selling it to girls. And so we had to sort of like put on some kind of whiz bang thing on a Saturday. Again, no extra pay for this, and really make the girls think, wow, this is a fantastic school, let's go to this school, it's amazing. And this was a secondary school, so I worked in secondary, but the girls that were coming to this day were in year 4. I think Estelle is our only primary specialist here. So you'll probably be like, oh, why did you do that, Laura? Feel free to say that in a minute. So I thought, great, let's do some computing with them. Let's do some physical computing. I'll get some like Adafruit gemmers and we'll get them to sew them onto a badge and power it with a little battery, and then we'll get them to code the lights that they've sewn onto the badge and make them flash. Like there was only like 3 lights, something like that. They had to sew on these 3 lights and the little microcontroller. My goodness me, that was the most stressful experience in the world, because believe it or not, year 4 children can't sew, not because of anything technical, but because they don't know how to sew. So there was me with these grand plans of sending them home with these flashing badges and stuff like that. And we probably spent 2 hours trying to get them to sew. And if I don't know if anybody's worked a lot with sort of like connective thread and stuff like that, but you know, if you go over the top of it, it shorts and it doesn't work. And oh my goodness me! So don't get any sewing involved with very small children, but do technical cool stuff. I did the same thing with the 6th form, and they really enjoyed it.
So you could classify this as one of your first attempts in learning.
Oh yeah,
it's an
big
acronym.
Fail.
Yeah, big fail in there somewhere.
Well, it's I went to a girls' school. I actually attribute my single-sex education to my success in science, because when I wanted to do physics, it was okay because physics wasn't for boys because there were no boys, you know. But I learned how to sew in school. I learned how to sew in my girls' school, but I also learned how to do maths, and I learned to like physics. So, but I'm surprised I didn't know how to sew. That's a new one for me.
They were pretty small.
Yeah, it's my experience as well. I used to be a brownie leader, and we used to do quite a lot of sewing with them, and they just don't do sewing at school, not really anymore. So yeah, it is definitely a skill that they have to learn outside of the classroom.
Yeah, we run a Sew Electric club for year 7, and that was quite eye-opening to realise that, you know, they don't know what a needle and a thread is, and that they haven't got the dexterity as well. So, you know, you have to start off with bigger needles, whereas when I was at school, we did textiles. So, you know, it was expected, wasn't it? And everybody learned how to sew a button on and things like that.
Yeah, and to cook.
Yes.
Boys and girls learnt that when I was at school as well. So it wasn't like we weren't segregated in terms of, you know, the girls did textiles, but everyone did it. So I think it's a useful skill to have.
Do you think, though, there's a danger if we say, oh, we're going to do this amazing event but we're going to teach them sewing? Do you think that might be perceived as turning the clocks back in terms of gender diversity a little bit? I suppose as long as you've got boys doing this as well at the same time.
I think you don't advertise it as we are going to learn to sew stuff. But Laura's like badges with the flashing lights and everything. It sounds amazing.
It wasn't. It should have been.
But if boys want to become surgeons, and there are lots of male surgeons around, they need to know how to sew.
Indeed. So I was hoping we might have heard a few more disasters. So if it's okay, I could just share one. I was taking part in a similar kind of workshop for 300 girls for a day-long activity and involving Raspberry Pi. So I put all the girls into groups of 3. So I needed to bring 100 Raspberry Pis and screens, and it would have taken me hours to set it all up. And I thought, just say to them, look, here's what you need to do. Go and find all the pieces and join them together. And I thought this will be like a fun kind of creative challenge. They can work as a team. And there was a male science teacher there. And I said to him, what do you do? And he said, oh, I'm just showing the girls how to do it. And every time they got stuck, he would wade in and say, look, just move out of the way. And I thought, oh, I really wanted them to experience some of the teamwork themselves. Right. When people often run these events, role models are mentioned or cited as examples. So we talked about Ada Lovelace Day. Now I know it can divide audiences, whether she's a great role model or whether she's not, whether you know, if our target audience are 11 to 12-year-old girls, are they going to be able to relate to? So what I'd like us to move on to now is I'm going to ask you to put forward some certain role models yourself. So there's different categories that you might want to consider. So one it could be somebody that's entirely fictional from a game that you've read of in a book or you've seen in a film. It may be that actually you want to put forward a very historical character who perhaps has been overlooked in some way. It could be that you'd like to name a lab or a building after this historical person rather than somebody fictional. Maybe there's some young, inspiring champion for girls in STEM, or a male champion for girls in STEM. Or is there a particular adult role model who you follow on social media and you've read their book and you're so inspired by what they do? So anybody would like to start?
I guess, go on.
For me, I think somebody who really inspired me and some of the students at work was Martha Lane Fox of lastminute.com. And like, she's I think the way she spoke and like her story and her physical, you know, like the accident that she had, and then how she's used technology to, you know, further her own career. And also, I mean, I think she was on the Dimbleby talks or something, I think a few years ago. And I just think that her whole speech was really inspirational. And I think that year we did actually get quite a lot of girls joining in and taking up the subject. And I think she came to our school, she was in front of us, she was real, the students could ask questions. And I suppose for us, that made the big difference.
That's amazing. You got Martha Lane Fox coming to your school. She's fabulous. I think there was a point when the one showed that she would ever walk again.
Yes, I mean, she did mention that, and that's what made her like so engaging and so inspirational, because like it wasn't just about, oh well, she's important and she's got the money and she's got this and all that, but there were so many different things that did set her back and how she overcame them, and that strength, that inner strength, and the courage that she had to move forward. It was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, no, she was great.
And I think that's been well received in the chat, because James has just said we see lots of male role models in tech: Zuckerberg, Musk, Jobs, Gates, Page, etc. So it's quite pertinent for us to identify current female CEO. So I think the CEO, from memory, of YouTube is a woman as well. Any other fictional, historical, young, inspiring adults?
Can I put forward one that isn't actually doesn't really fit into one of your categories? Okay. I was thinking about this, and I really thought about someone who was really inspirational to me in terms of my teaching and how I actually teach now, and also probably in many ways led me into what I do with Digital Schoolhouse. And that is, she was my NQT mentor for my very first year of teaching. And I don't know if she's watching, Heidi. She was probably the first teacher that I'd seen that did things differently to other people. She's the first teacher who I've seen sing to her class quite regularly. She just brought inspiration, play and creativity to her classroom. But not only did it herself, she would inspire that in her whole department. So as a result, we did really interesting, inspiring things, like we ran like an off timetable day where we worked with the science department and we did a whole CSI project, and we brought computing into that, and they had to examine the crime scene and work out how long the body had been laying there. And then they did like database skills and things and tried to find the murderer. But she was a real inspiration, and I really believe that as a result of the way that she taught, that meant that I could then be creative in what I do now. So
you've obviously not been to any of Alan's classes. I want to hear somebody singing.
No, you know, Estelle, though, that's so right, because they don't have to be somebody like Martha Lane Fox that we can put on a pedestal. Often these role models, they're within the setting of where we're working, and we don't always have to look, you know, to the sky to be inspired. We can see great examples around us. Penny's probably going to go a little bit red in the face, but I remember when I was talking about doing certain things early on, and I met a couple of people in and around the area of Essex, they kept saying, have you met Penny Cater? Have you met Penny Cater? And I was like, no. And so many people kept saying, you need to. And I think, you know, maybe our audience, I'd be saying to them now on YouTube, who are the people who are close to you where you work that you could be, you know, you've cause to celebrate. Sorry, Penny, your face got the same color as your jumper. Any other role models?
You're very, it's very true though, because I have a colleague who I've worked with over a number of years, and she continues to inspire me. Katie, you probably know Katie. She works at Saffron Walden, and she was, we were NQTs together, and we've just sort of followed each other. But it's just nice to have somebody else who has the same mindset and the same challenge to inspire you and to really question what you're doing. And I don't think we tend to get that necessarily as much in teaching as what I found in sort of other careers. And I think it's really important that we challenge ourselves, but also we challenge other people's thought process on how we teach and why we do it in this way and why don't we do it a different way. And I think that's really important. What my other inspiring character would be J.K. Rowling, which obviously is, you know, people know, but I think the characters that she wrote about were inspiring as well. And one of my favourite ones is Hermione Granger. I think she has that strength of character, she has that resolve, and I just think it, you know, the whole combination of J.K. Rowling's story, but also the characters that she wrote about was amazing, and that allows us to challenge ourselves that, you know, things don't have to be normal. And certainly I was the only female student in my engineering class, and I was told not to do it and to do secretarial, and I just refused, you know. And it's that type of thing I think I've been involved in for so many years now, that you really want to change it and you want to champion the subject, which is why you go out there and you spend your time and, you know, most of your life trying to change people's views and just saying that, you know, we do have a place, and, you know, it's not just about sitting at a computer, and it's not the textbook picture that we all see about, you know, there's a man sat there at the computer and he's just programming. Computing is a whole host of things, and I think, you know, women are very creative and they bring that different dimension to it.
Yeah, computing is about people. I have so many role models though, and something that you just said, Penny, really resonates with me, which is that refusal. And I think maybe we are where we are because we've also refused, but I feel it's our duty as well to help others. So if we see somebody being challenged, we have to stand up for them if they can't stand up for themselves. And I guess my first role model was my mum. I'm from Gibraltar, which is 2.5 square miles, 33,000 inhabitants, small village mentality. My mother decided she was going to be a policewoman. And these were in the days when women were not police officers. And given the fact that when she got her uniform, it was a skirt, heels, and regulation handbag. I'm not sure what they thought she was going to do with a handbag. Maybe run after robbers in her heels and chuck a handbag at them. I have no idea. But, you know, my mum taught me to stand up for myself and to just not take no as an answer. If I wanted to do something, I could do it. But if we go back to the historical role models, we're really keen to have a campaign at the university. I want to name all the labs after computing figures. And I really want to name the networking lab after Hedy Lamarr. And I don't know if you've heard of Hedy Lamarr. I just think she's fantastic. Because everybody thought she was this glamorous Hollywood actress. And that's what really fascinates me about her, that you can be geeky and intelligent and an inventor and also be glamorous and feminine. And it's okay to do both at the same time. So I really like that about her. And she discovered frequency hopping, which we all know was one of the technologies that helped win the war because it helped submarines talk to each other.
There's just one thing that worries me, Nikki, is knowing your tendency and your, you know, how much research you do. Do you have enough labs to name after all these great figures?
No, we really don't. So I'm going to hit the engineering department when I'm done.
Or would there be a way that you could have a poll and every year the rooms might be named in honor of other notable women in STEM? Or
Possibly, but it's really hard to get signs made, and having signs made every year might be quite difficult. But you're right, I don't have enough. But if we talk about fictional, I am a massive science fiction fan, and I think, when we look back to when I was little in the 70s, there was very little that we could find in the media to say these are the people like me. So for me, Princess Leia, or if we want to give her a proper title, General Leia, was a fantastic role model. Somebody who was on the big screen and she didn't need rescuing. She was doing the rescuing herself. So I think she was fantastic. And then we've got Rey, of course. I think Rey's a really great role model for little girls. She looks after herself. She's really good at tinkering with things. So there's so much out there now. And I've got to give Jodie Whittaker a special mention, because I think she's absolutely fantastic.
And can we leave space for Laura to make a recommendation as well?
I was thinking about the media actually as well. So I was sort of racking my brains thinking, who do I think is a good role model? And I was thinking about, like, what do we see, in the media as a role model? I was thinking of specifically a sort of a computing role model rather than sort of science in general. And I think when you see women in things, you tend to see them as either, the woman who wears glasses but would mysteriously become really attractive when she takes them off. I'm not going to take mine off, so you'll never find out. Or I noticed, like, there's a couple of things that I've been playing or watching recently, and the women in it who are sort of computing-y are always hackers, and they're either a baddie and they're sort of a really glamorous hacker baddie, or they're sort of on some kind of shady footing with the law. And I found that really interesting, that either, you're just sort of a random character who doesn't have very many lines and, sits at a computer with glasses on, or you're a glamorous baddie. And what sort of message is that?
What about Felicity Smoke from DC Arrow universe?
Not somebody I know of, but go on.
What about her?
Check her out.
So can I mention a couple of things from the chat? So we had James suggested a character called Riley from MacGyver. That's a new one on me.
I thought he meant Riley as in Alien.
Well, I don't know. James just said MacGyver is a character called Riley that girls have spoken about in class before. And Laura prompted me to remember last month, and Nikki, you joined us when we discussed Hackers the movie, and there is a very positive, strong female lead in that film, and Nikki's going to tell us her pseudonym. She's called Kate, but what's she?
Acid Burn.
Acid Burn, yes. Okay. Now, there's a question that's a really good one that's come up in the YouTube chat where, and there's a few points that have come forward. So it's kind of something like, well, there are some projects, initiatives out there, it's like the Ada Lovelace kind of day, like Cyber Discovery, Cyber First, where some of them are targeted specifically at girls. And there's a bit of discussion going on whether that's a good thing, whether that's something that should be embraced, or it's like, what do we say to the boys so that we try to make sure that it is equality we're going towards, not superiority. We're not okay. So how do we temper that?
I found go on.
No, go on, Laura.
I was going to say, I found this a really hard one. So ages ago, in about 2012, I started doing a thing called #include, which was it started off as trying to get more girls into computer science. And then very quickly, I realized that this was like a very small part of a very big can of worms, and that there's actually lots of different problems in terms of diversity in computer science. So, for example, students from poorer backgrounds finding it difficult to access, or students with special educational needs, and sort of, I guess it's the tip of an iceberg, really.
Okay, any other? We had a lot of people wanting to talk at the same time.
I was just going to say, one of the things that I did, because I think it is potentially an issue that there are, we want to get more people in computer science. We do obviously want more girls, and what I did was run because it was the first time that I did it, I'd run the Cyber First Girls competition, and we had some girls down one side of the classroom, and then on the other side we run the Cyber First competition, which was open to boys. And what we found was actually that they crossed over and they actually started to talk to each other, which was really nice. And then when the girls got a bit stuck, the boys helped. And when the boys got a bit stuck, the girls helped. And actually, it just developed their confidence. And I think that's what I found a lot of the girls needed, was just a bit of confidence in that actually, you know, it's this big scary thing that only, you know, they've seen boys do, because that's how it's been portrayed as computing. But to actually get them involved and to talk to each other. And I also had some sixth formers who were sort of acted as mentors to them, to try and build that sort of confidence and relationship up. So that seemed to work quite well.
Isn't it the case though that what you're saying, Penny, is that girls need allies in order to be able to succeed? And
well,
what we're doing is by targeting girls all the time, we're almost putting the blame on them. So I would like to see more initiatives aimed at boys, because these boys are going to be the future male leaders that girls and women are going to have to contend with. And if we can actually get these boys on the girls' side and get them to be allies, some of those barriers that are in the way of girls will be removed.
Yeah, and I think we, you know, when we run the So Electric Club, we had we run it just for girls, and we were criticised slightly because, you know, boys couldn't do it. And it wasn't that boys couldn't do it, it's just that girls at the time felt more comfortable in the little group and they didn't want any comments and things like that. So we tried to get two groups running in the same at the same time in the same room doing different activities. And actually what you find is they do come together as a team, and it is, you know, when we go out there in the end, it's not just us working on our own with lots of people around. It's a team, isn't it? And it's that's what I try to develop really within the school environment, is the teamwork, because it's not just, you know, you can have somebody who's a really good programmer, but then you need somebody who's going to create the program, who's going to come up with the ideas and the thought process. And I think the more that you can try and amalgamate them to working together, I think that formulates things for the future.
Yeah, I think kind of backing up Nikki's point, it's important that if we're targeting audiences to try to change their thinking, it shouldn't just be girls that we're targeting as, because it's not necessarily the girls that we need to be changing. It needs to be their parents, particularly, you know, if their dad's like, what do you mean you're going to go and do computer science? You know, so and if we can't correct that, you know, these things will perpetuate, won't they, these myths, unless we do something about it. Now, there are organizations out there who do put on programs of activities. And one of the questions I was going to ask was, if you came into a bit of money and you decided you were going to decorate the bathroom and go on a holiday, but you also decided you were going to leave some money or you're going to sponsor a particular organization, is there one out there that you would like to champion that is doing things that will have an impact?
Can I split my money between two?
So my question is there one? And you're saying, no, Alan,
No,
there's more than one.
So I'd go 50-50 between Special Effect, and they are a charity which they basically try to make computer games accessible to everybody. So they develop special controllers for people who have really severe physical disabilities. And what they do is absolutely amazing, and it basically brings these people's lives back to, you know, they feel they can really engage with their friends and things, which perhaps they wouldn't be able to do so easily previously. And my other half would go to Kodak, and they work with prisons and bringing computing curriculum into prisons to give the people who are currently serving time the opportunity to upskill and actually go out and potentially have a job at the end of it, which is absolutely amazing. So that's kind of that's what I would go for.
For me, it's going to be STEMettes, because I've used STEMettes a lot, and you know, I've taken loads of girls to their events at various venues, and the amount of work and the diversity of staff that come on and give up their time at the weekend and the evenings. I must say it was phenomenal what they organized. So yeah.
Can I just add, STEMet many years ago really helped me with something like this. So They suggested we organize a trip. So they said they could offer so many places. So I hand selected a few girls who I thought might be interested. I said they could bring anybody each girl could bring anybody they wanted. So we weren't saying it was a girls only trip. And we took a photograph when we arrived at this event of our group. And years later, when these girls were all kind of 15, 16, I could not believe when I look back at the photograph, they were all in the GCSE computer science class. And I still cannot believe that, you know, we reached that point just by accident, perhaps. Other organizations we'd like to champion, or some of you work for some of these and you've not mentioned them.
Following on from the STEMettes, there's a group that's recently, probably about a year now, they've been set up. It's the Essex STEMettes. And there's some really amazing young ladies on there who, one of them's AC Coder, who is doing some phenomenal work, and she's doing videos and tutorials, and she's really championing, you know, the cause, as it were. So that group, I think, I would give the money to.
I think mine's, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, we're all waiting for Laura to say Raspberry Pi.
I'm obviously going to say that. I know it's such a cliche because I work for them, but to be honest, like, I'm really proud of one particular thing, which is the initiative which has been sort of distributing kit to students who've basically not had any kit and not been able to do any learning in lockdown, because, you know, why is that the situation in this day and age that we've been in for a year's worth of lockdowns almost, it feels like, and then, you know, they're still not able to access any technology. So obviously there's a fairly sensible, easy, low-cost solution in a Raspberry Pi, but I think the important part of that program is not that, you know, we just dropped a bunch of Raspberry Pis on people and said off you go. There's also a lot of support that goes with that. So there's been training of people to work with these students and make sure that they're able to make the best use of the kit. So for me, that's, you know I'm sort of promoting somewhere that I work, but I feel quite happy and quite proud to work somewhere that is doing something like that.
I think it speaks volumes to the fact that you are proud to say, you know, the organization I work for, I stand behind them, and I am happy to recommend them. And, you know, it wasn't completely by accident that I invited you along, because people have seen, and, you know, through the likes of Code Club and Coder Dojo, which are, they don't set out to say, oh, well, we're trying to get this percentage of girls. We don't advertise what they do. It just so happens that when you look at them, there is, would you say, higher gender, you know, a better gender representation or diversity?
Yeah, I think obviously there's always more to do, but there's a research project, if anyone's interested in getting involved with it. There's a project called Gender Balance in Computing, which I believe is still looking for people to participate. So if you're interested, have a look on the Raspberry Pi website or just search for it.
And Catherine Childs is involved with some of that.
Yes.
And I mentioned before Hello World magazine, and you can read content written by Catherine and other members of the team working on that gender project. I'm looking at the time. I have plans to fit so many more questions in. Maybe I should have talked less and allowed the panel to speak more. We did say we would run for 45 minutes or so, and we're up to our 45th minute. So maybe we shouldn't wait another year before doing things like this. Maybe we should try to plan some more times to do that. If we could wrap up, maybe if anybody can think, if there's a teacher, and I know there are because I'm watching on YouTube, there are teachers watching this at the moment. So would you feel brave enough to make a suggestion, offer some advice to those teachers that they might go away and write that down, and they'll think of it and it'll remind them. So, and then we'll finish there.
I'd like to tell teachers to reach out to your local university, actually, because, you know, we do a lot of outreach work. Some of it is because it's on our workload and we have to. Some of it is because we want to. Some of it is not for altruistic purposes because we want to recruit students, but that doesn't matter because we both get what we want out of it. And a lot of it is based around research. And so, for example, my colleagues and I, we've just published a book called Science of Superheroes, and it was about getting more kids interested in science, but it's also a public engagement project. So don't think that you have to do everything yourself. Reach out to avenues where you might get unexpected help and more than you think. So
like
that's
the
my
examples
advice.
that Rahini mentioned before. There's people near us. Some in the chat, somebody mentioned that they were close to GCHQ and they were able to organize a trip there.
Yeah, I'd like to agree with what Nikki was saying, because working with King's College in London, where we did a lot of PGC, like we were having them as trainees at our school, but working with the university and tapping into the research and some of the new pedagogy and new ideas and concepts coming in, it was really, really helpful. And that's what made, I suppose, when you've been doing a job for quite a long time, you do need that extra sort of inspiration from somewhere, which can be difficult to get if you're working on your own and in your own little cupboard. So yeah, no, I agree with you, Nikki.
And I love going into primary schools. It makes such a change from 18-year-old boys.
I would say I concur with all of that. And I would also say, your network is your biggest ally. Really engage with what's going on, and don't just limit yourself to computer science. I went to an event up in King's College that the IET run, and it was amazing to see. I saw some of the things that students were developing in their PhDs using Raspberry Pis, and I was flabbergasted to see the connections. So I think really open your network and open the whole picture of computer science and how it crosses maths and science and technology and the STEM subjects. I think that's really key. Has been really key for me.
I would say my top tip would be to do some physical computing if you haven't done any already, because I had a class where there were some very, very sort of too cool for school year 9 girls, and they did the first thing that was basically light up an LED and make it blink, and you've never seen the cool image drop so fast as when an LED goes on. I can tell you that they're like, wow, this is amazing, this is the best lesson ever, and they literally just turned an LED on. So if you haven't tried it, try it. Possibly not with sewing, but give it a go.
I love, Laura, that you said early on that you had a disastrous experience. However, you're still saying to go back and try physical computing. Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you about many disasters that have happened, and if you want to hear about more disasters, come and find me on Twitter or whatever. But it's one of those things that there's so many rewards from doing it. It's going to go wrong. You're going to have a nightmare lesson where nothing goes right. A board the kids loved it when the boards got fried, because occasionally you'd accidentally have somebody connect something up wrong, and then a bit of smoke comes out and it stinks, and they'd loved that because they got to break something. I mean, how often does a kid get to break something? Maybe in science, possibly not usually in most lessons, but it's just so physical, it's just so engaging, and then when they can see the results of what they have done on the computer in the real world, it's just wow.
My tip would be to either go to the Digital Schoolhouse website, or you can contact me and we can put you in contact with a local Digital Schoolhouse teacher, and we can either come to you or you can come and visit them at their school and do some workshops around creativity and play in computing. Yeah.
There was also a lovely suggestion in our YouTube chat from Martin, and Martin saying the pedagogy, the way we're actually teaching our students, we can do a lot to make it sort of more receptive or more relatable to girls. So he mentioned PRIM, which is the predict, run, investigate, model, make. Yes. And so listen,
I don't think girls are the problem.
Well, no, but if it's the teacher that's the problem, and the teacher decides to try these different ways of teaching, if I would say if they're going to be better for girls, they're probably going to be better for all the students. Everybody's going to gain if we're all reflecting more about the way that we teach and whether there's better ways and more effective ways. And like Laura said before, take some risks and then think, oh, I know why that didn't work quite so well. Great. So, go back and do it better the next time round. Let that be your first attempt in learning. So, well, here's to a future year when we no longer need to hold International Women's Days, because all of these kind of gender diversity issues have been solved. But until then, don't give up, keep trying things. And you've still got a couple of minutes to run over and watch Hidden Figures on Film 4, or 1 hour later, you go to Film 4+1. It's an amazing film, really, really is. You can buy DVDs for about £1 as well if you don't have access to the film. Thank you to our wonderful women who have joined us in computing education this evening. Oh, and we've got a promotion there for a Lego NASA kit, of course. I mean, how would Nikki not have that kit? So we're going to say goodbye to our people, our audience on YouTube now, as I'm going to stop the stream in just a moment. Once I've figured out how I can do that. So we're going to say goodbye to our people on YouTube. Thank you very much.
Bye.
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 And that should stop now. And then I'm going to stop the recording.